Hello, everyone. Today is December 21st, 2022. I'm here today with Cameron Ravanbach. Cameron is a sustainability solutions engineer. Thanks for coming on the podcast today, Cameron.
Yeah, thank you. Happy to be here.
Close. Oh, you can move the microphone too.
Get a little closer. How's
yes, that's good.
Happy to be here.
Yes, I'm happy you're here too. We were talking about FIFA right before this.
Yeah.
And you were ranked like 74th in the world and still ended up losing by 5 in a tournament.
Yeah, I mean, we got to put some boundaries on that. I was ranked 73rd for one given week for FIFA 2013.
Okay.
And that's probably because I played over 50 games
that
in a
week.
given week, and so I thought I was really good, and I entered into the tournament on campus, and I lost first round 8-3.
Okay.
And I just put the cleats up, the controller up.
Yes.
And just quit from there.
Yes. Competitive FIFA.
Competitive FIFA.
Not amateur.
Yeah.
FIFA's a great game.
Yeah, it was fun. I mean, it's a fun game, just online or playing with your friends, and it can get really heated.
Yes.
As you probably know. Like, I remember playing against Alec Gasparian time when we were at freshman year of college.
Wow.
College roommates. What's up, Alec? And I remember I beat him and he threw the controller.
Wow. Did he play FIFA?
No. But Scott Metzger too, also floor mate in Argo 2 Revel. So we played some FIFA. It was a good time.
He was good on the controller.
Yeah.
Like, yes. It's something about it. Like, I know Call of Duty people get pretty crazy like when they get shot out of nowhere.
Yeah. I also play that. It's like the one game I do play still. I got an Xbox during COVID. There was nothing else to do.
Yes.
Just working and kind of just needed a way to blow off some steam. So got the Xbox and started playing Warzone, which is really fun, but I sucked.
Okay.
But I would play with like all my friends from high school. So we got together and we'd play online, but we would lose. I don't think we didn't win a game. It was like months until we won our first game, and it was the most incredible thing.
Awesome.
Ever.
Wow. Was that like how it was when you guys were younger, or would you win when you were younger?
Well, I feel like when we were younger, we were playing a lot more, and we were a little bit better. We were playing Halo a lot.
Okay.
And we would usually play, just together. So some of us were better than others. We'd set up like the LAN parties, like
Yes.
the birthday where everyone brings their Xboxes and everyone's in different rooms.
Yes.
And they're all connected. So that was super fun. So this is kind of a nostalgic way to, bring it back and play some games. But I mean, these kids these days are really good.
Yes.
And they're all like 13 years old or in pros.
I mean, a 13-year-old has a lot of time to play video games.
Yeah.
I
Definitely.
remember like being 13 and like the first thing, 3:00, getting home. First thing I'm doing, going upstairs and turning on the system and playing video games. And it's like most people work until 5 or 6 p.m. and then a lot of them have significant others, or like they don't have moms cooking them dinner, so they're worrying about that too.
Yeah. I'm definitely the evening warrior where it's like working all day. And then, I mean, it depends on whether everyone else can get on. I don't usually play solo, but you'll get the text. It's like, are we dropping tonight? And then we'll all hop on. And then I'll obviously check in with Justine to see if that's cool. If, there aren't any plans for the night, or, she's doing her own thing. We're watching a movie or she's going to yoga or something. I'll be like, yeah, it's my time to game.
Nice. I know it's like an important time, that blow off time. And I don't know if you take off a day of the week, but it's kind of like that in the sense of it's difficult to keep going.
Yeah, I agree. But then again, it's like, do you really want to spend your time? I know my setup is at the same desk that I work at. Is it really productive to work all day, not treat my body right, and then just go like start gaming? Or are there other ways for me to be productive? Yeah,
Yes.
for sure. But I think from a mental perspective, it's like, especially during COVID too, it was just like we couldn't do anything. So it was a way to just connect with my friends online
Yes.
and like play games.
You told me you were living in New York. Were you in New York when COVID out broke out, or were you in San Diego?
I was in New York.
Wow.
Yeah, it was like an apocalypse. It was kind of crazy. It was
How long had you been in New York?
at that point I was there for a year and a half.
Okay.
So, yeah, end of 2018, I moved there, and then the first case of COVID, what was like end of 2019, and eventually made its way to the U.S. And by March of 2020, the whole place was shut down. And I was working in Dumbo, Brooklyn, living in the Lower East Side, and remember going to work, saying bye to my coworkers, and then it was like I didn't see them.
Yes.
Some of them like in person for years. I still haven't seen some of them.
Yes.
So yeah, it was pretty crazy. And I just worked from our little apartment, 600 square feet apartment. And yeah, it was bad. Like going to the grocery store was like going out, you'd have gloves on, the mask on, you're covered up everywhere, and you'd go to this grocery store and like people are just like crazy and you don't want to be near people, so people start coughing. You make your way back, and yeah, the toilet paper situation was crazy there
Yes.
too. But eventually I think we lasted about 3 months and then said we gotta change this up. So came out to San Diego. My parents had like my old bedroom, so we just hung out here for 2 weeks and then made the decision that we were just going to move back to San Diego. So moved in with my parents as a 29-year-old, 28-year-old.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not an unnormal thing to do for us.
No, I think that's kind of the millennial thing. We've all been through that, lived with our parents at later stages in life.
Yes. And it's interesting because, like, it was like for our parents' generation, maybe even the generation in between us and our parents, if you go back to your parents' house at 25 or later, that's a bad thing. But now it's like, I mean, you didn't stay there.
I mean, we stayed there for a year.
That's a long time.
Yeah, like she was my girlfriend at the time now, my fiance. But we stayed there for a year, and yeah, it was tough, like being roommates with my parents again. But it's normalized in other countries, like in
Yes.
parts of Europe, people stay with their parents until they have kids, and then they move out.
We're both Iranian,
Yeah.
and that's very normal in Iranian culture.
Yeah. So I was fine with it.
Yes. That's good that you were fine with it.
Yeah. And, thankfully they didn't charge us rent. So
That's huge.
and working remote jobs, we were able to, save a lot of money. So it was good.
Yes. You mentioned like being scared. It's kind of interesting. That first year was very strange, both New York and in California, where it was I was very scared. Like I remember hearing my neighbor cough like over there, and I was like, is he sick? And I remember hearing my neighbor cough across, the walkway, and I was also like, what? Like, and it really brought home the fact that like you lived in New York, I live in the middle of San Diego. I don't know, it's crazy. There's something to it when you live in a city.
Yeah. Especially such a dense
Yes.
city too. I had to go into the office one time to go get my my things there. I had my monitor was still there, and we were canceling the lease, so I had to go. It was a co-working space, and I walk out of the apartment, and I tell Justine, I was like, I have to do this. I have to go to the office. She's like, make sure you wear your gloves, take this hand sanitizer, take this backpack. And I was like, I Am Legend, you know, how he's packing up and he's
Yes.
going out on his like adventure. That's what it felt like. And I rode the subway for the first time in months to go get this stuff. And it was eerie. Like there was no one there, maybe a few people. Everyone was looking at each other. I was able to get to the place, and I was just swift, just grabbed the stuff, hop back in, made it back to the apartment. But it was, yeah, and it was strange. You know, walk around the streets in New York, and it was empty. You know, it's like, it was weird to see for sure.
And you'd been there a year and a half, so you knew what it was like.
Yeah, I mean, I was. It's not a long time to be there, but you know, it's enough to just get a sense of what it's like.
Yes.
But I would have been there longer. I think I probably would have still been there, but things happened for a reason. Brought me back to San Diego, so I feel like it accelerated my life for sure. You know,
Yes.
I bought a house last year. Thanks to moving in with my parents, that wouldn't have happened.
Congratulations.
I'm engaged now, so I feel like, I don't know if a lot of other people feel like this, but it just accelerated my life into adulthood. I mean, everyone kind of lost some years, but yeah, that's how it felt.
Yes. It wasn't fun during it, but I think people reacted seriously. Like
Yeah,
they made moves. You made 2 big moves. And like you said, it accelerated your life. I felt like the same way. Like I had to do a lot of growth in 2020, applied that in 2021. 2022 has been a very strange year, I feel, because it's all now things happen. Like 2020 was a big year in the United States, whether we talk about COVID, talk about the Black Lives Matter movement, talk about a lot of things. Things changed, and it's interesting now that COVID is kind of dying down, even though I got a case of COVID that I wasn't too happy about last month, and I thought that was interesting. Like you mentioned earlier, it started in late 2019. Here we are in late 2022. It's been 3 years, and I'm still catching COVID pretty seriously. People are still getting boosters. It really is for the long haul.
yeah, I agree. I've gotten it twice. December 2020, December 2021.
Oh wow.
So I'm just waiting. There's only
A few
10 more days of 2022 in
Yes.
December. So yeah, hopefully, I don't get COVID from this microphone, but
Yes, hopefully. I don't think you will. I don't think you will. I don't think you will.
yeah, but I don't want to talk about COVID. What
No.
else?
What else? We can talk about sustainability.
Sure.
So, we went to school together, UCSD. In UCSD, you graduated with an environmental engineering degree. What did you gain from obtaining that degree? What
Yeah.
did you feel you gained?
Yeah. Well, the journey is interesting. I came into UCSD as a structural engineer, actually, and I shifted to environmental engineering. And environmental engineering was a new program that was started within the mechanical engineering department, so MAE. And I had interest in sustainability, which wasn't necessarily characterized or categorized as that, but going green and kind of eco-conscious mindset. So I was like, yeah, that's what I want to do. So I enrolled in the program. I was able to switch within my first year, and the coursework, because it was a new program, was pretty closely aligned with mechanical engineering. So all the basic classes like statics and dynamics and taking fluids and thermo, all those classes, but then they'd piece in things like environmental sciences, or took a renewable energy course and part of the capstone was, focused on solar panels and kind of different tilt angles and how shading affects it. So we got it pretty deep, and it was cool. One of the funny things, though, is that I got an email, I think 2 years ago, that the program is no longer ABET accredited. So the program doesn't exist anymore.
Wow.
And it makes sense because I graduated and we looked at, so in California, we have the FE exam, that's like the first level to get up to get to your PE. So our entire graduating class, we looked at the FE exam for environmental engineering, and we didn't know any of it.
Really?
It was all about, things like soil remediation and things. And we're like, I don't know how to take this test. So we all took the mechanical one and passed the mechanical one. So it makes sense why they would discontinue the program as like an core environmental engineering, because there are other, programs at other universities that are very environmental engineering focused. So, I would maybe classify myself maybe as like a mechanical with a emphasis in, energy efficiency or renewables. And that's actually what they're calling it now. It's a minor under mechanical engineering. So hopefully no employers, are asking about why my degree is no longer accredited, but, I have a job now and I have a track record.
Yes.
So, like, no one's looking at my GPA. They just want to know.
Yes. That's interesting too. I can't believe that. Wow.
Yeah.
That's very difficult to create a new course. Do you know how many years it had existed before you enrolled?
0.
Really?
Yeah. Freshman year, they started it. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, what? Go.
I was just gonna say. I mean, I feel like in a lot of things in my life, I'm always down to try the new thing or whatever it is. I mean, like us, like doing the fraternity thing. It was a brand new, starting from scratch. Building it up, and I was interested in doing that. This program, it was a new program. I'm interested. I ended up working at a startup company, building, starting from nothing and building that up. So I think it's a kind of a consistent thing in my life where, I'm excited to try the new thing or help build something out. Unfortunately for the environmental engineering degree, it didn't pan out, but it is what it is.
For you, it seemed to have, even if you didn't gain that education, traditional, I mean, you still gained a solid education in mechanical. You still continued with the environmental path. Did you take the FE for mechanical?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. But I got I passed the FE exam, but I never pursued a professional engineering degree. So.
Okay. Well.
But I have engineer in my title, so.
Yes.
My Iranian parents are happy now.
Yes. They really like that. But so what did you do when you left college?
Yeah. So, well, during college, I interned with the strategic energy department. So not a lot of people knew this, but UCSD is actually a microgrid. So it's completely separate from SDG&E, where we have generation resources on campus. So we have, these big turbines that, provide the majority of the power to the grid on campus. And then we have a fuel cell, and we have solar, spread out. So it's all these different generation systems to like talk to each other. And then a lot of the research from all the different departments on campus help, they get funding and they do a lot of research around it, and like it's kind of like a test bed for a lot of things. As of late, a lot of focus has been on like electric vehicles and things. But anyway, I interned for this guy, Byron Washam, who led that, like he oversaw all of the strategic energy department. So all the funding that goes in and kind of managing the projects, he was kind of the guru. So I was lucky enough to be his, intern. So I got to learn a lot about the microgrid, and I would give tours and I'd help put decks together. So I kind of gained a lot of experience in terms of, how energy systems work and, who some of the big players are. But I think that helped me build kind of foundation and helped me build my network. And, I think that helped me build kind of foundation and helped me build my network. And, I think that helped me build kind of foundation and helped me build my network. And, I think that helped me build kind of foundation and helped me build my network. And, I think that helped me build kind of foundation and helped me build my network. And, through that connection helped me get my first job as it was essentially still an internship, but I worked at EDF Renewable Energy in San Diego. They're a global player in renewables. At that time, they're primarily doing, utility scale renewable energy projects, so like solar and wind, and they were getting into battery storage. But I went in and interned there I did it for about 6 months, and, very corporate setting. And I was 23 years old, and this opportunity came up to go play water polo abroad. And I was like, man, because I saw the future. I was like, all right, I could do this, but there's also this opportunity. Like, am I going to have another opportunity to do something, like to go play water polo abroad? And I, had to sit on that, and I decided to leave and go pursue the water polo career, for 6 months to just go play for a club team.
And we spoke about that, but how was you went to Germany?
Yeah.
How was playing water polo in Germany?
Yeah, it was fun. I mean, it's a good league. There's probably 3 to 4 teams that are consistently at the top. But we were in a small town called Esslingen, and I came in, and we were actually a package deal. So 2 of my other teammates came with me. So it was 3 of us that went and played for this club team. But it was really cool to experience another culture and, become friends with these people who are halfway across the world. And, it's being such a small town, a lot of the town centered itself around this club team, this water polo team.
Wow. So
they'd all come to the games. And yeah, I mean, I wouldn't qualify technically a professional club team, but I wasn't paid, I was paying to be there. So it was just more of the experience. And even in there, it was like a lot of pressure,
Really?
like to perform, if I'm not making saves, there's still pressure. Like people in the town are like talking about it kind of thing. But,
okay.
And I can't imagine at a professional level, in like soccer, it's like, there's a lot riding on your shoulders for sure.
Oh man, there's a lot riding on the shoulders. One thing I was thinking about in this last World Cup was if Brazil and Neymar were to continue to the finals and have played France, and if somehow Brazil won, Neymar would have to stop playing for PSG. Just because, there's a lot of pressure, and like, whether it's you scored a goal against them or, when you're in an environment where people are really care about the sports, really care about the club. I mean, athletes feel the pressure.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and I wouldn't even know how to compare it to like that level, because when you're talking about World Cup and having a whole country on your back, it's intense. I mean, I wouldn't be able to speak to it, but one of my friends, Josh Cohen, he was the UCSD goalkeeper. My age, he was my roommate for 2 years, junior and senior year. He got picked up by an Israeli club team called Maccabi Haifa, and he got the starting spot there.
Wow.
And they got into the Champions League. So he was playing in the group stages of the Champions League this year as a starting goalkeeper, and they had PSG in their bracket, so they played him twice. And he was faced up against, the Neymar, Mbappe, Messi combo.
That's crazy.
So it's crazy because someone, that I know is playing at that level and is experiencing it, and he's told me that it depends, what club you play for, obviously, and the fans are going to be different everywhere, but there's a lot of pressure because you're an asset to the team and you have to perform. People oftentimes, I feel like, will remember what you did last,
yes.
for them.
Yes, it's unfortunate, but generally that's human nature.
Yeah, it's like, what have you done for me lately?
Yes, it's like everything before, lately. And we are speaking about, club, but you were also on a Division I, pretty successful college water polo team at UCSD, and you played goalkeeper. what was it like? What is it like, for you playing goalkeeper in water polo, goalkeeper at a high level?
Yeah. It's interesting because like one of my goals for this year was to start coaching again. So I'm, working with younger goalies, and I can see how they're actually. So I'm trying to, gathering my thoughts around, what is it like to actually be a goalkeeper and like play at the levels that I did, and how do I coach and kind of bring out what I saw as kind of good traits to have in a good goalkeeper. But playing at UCSD was incredible. We were always underdogs. We were Division I, so we played against the top teams. We never had scholarships or funding. We didn't get that until my senior year. All we got was $500 a year for books, and that was it. Whereas some of the teams we're playing with have full rides, scholarships, and they have Europeans that are coming that have probably played pro, and they're really good. So it was really cool to be able to play at a high level. As a goalkeeper, though, a few things, it's, I think one of the biggest things is, to have leadership skills, because you're commanding the defense. You have to organize the defense in a certain way that's going to play to your strengths for the success of the team, right? If I'm there, I'm telling people kind of where to go, how to navigate so that the ball is coming from the lowest probability shot so I can make a save and we can, counter the other way. So one, being a leader, I think other than that, it's keeping emotional poise, which has helped me for sure. That's like one of the biggest things. And part of my coaching is keeping a good mental state. Because oftentimes you'll see, people physically, the really, really good goalkeepers, and they have good reaction skills. They've trained, they have really strong legs, and they're able to leg out of the water. But most of the game is mental. Like a goal will go, you're going to get scored on regardless in every game. It's just the highest probability that you're going to get scored on. So trying to not forget about what's happened, but think about what's next, and using those nerves that you have for a positive, I think is important. So, not getting too high or too low has been, like, through my college career, probably one of the bigger things too.
Not getting too high or too low.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it happens, you become, you're a hothead and you get too cocky or whatever, but then you get scored on, and then that kind of changes your mentality. Or if you get scored on and you just kind of like drop and you're non-existent in the game. It's happened to me. And like my first game as a starting goalkeeper my sophomore year, my redshirt sophomore year, I think I let in 18 goals, and that's a really high number. I wasn't even in the, if I weren't in the goal, like they probably would have scored less, So that was, sometimes you have to hit that rock bottom to kind of like build yourself up, I think. So yeah, I was, not getting, too low or down on yourself. The goals are going to go in. It's just kind of how you react to certain situations that kind of define you, I think, as a goalkeeper. And that's applicable to so many things in life,
Yes. It's applicable to so many things. And one thing, it seems like you've been able to apply those lessons outside of the pool, outside of a competitive sport environment, which is one reason that, people, there's a lot of value in competitive sports, because you can channel that, what you just said. We're going to feel down, or we're going to feel high, or we're going to feel down. There's days we're going to give up 18 goals, and there may be days where we get pretty close to a clean sheet or something like that. But at the end of the day, when we go to sleep, wake up, regardless, 18 goals, clean sheet, it's a new day.
Yeah. I mean, in that situation, so we were up in Santa Barbara. I got shelled for 18 goals, and I got reamed by the coach.
Really?
Yeah. And I remember we were driving in the car back, and he's sitting, I don't know why, but I just happened to be in the passenger seat of the van, and he's in the driver's seat and doesn't say a single word to me the whole 3.5 hour drive back home. I was like, man, my career is over. But, it's things happen for a reason. Bounce back. Was able to solidify my spot, and ended up getting good credentials. We didn't win the conference that year, but the next year we won the conference. Even though we had two of our starters not playing, and then our senior year we were ranked 6th in the nation, which is cool. And we ended up through our conference got into the Final Four, which we hosted. So top 4 teams got to play in that tournament. So it was a pretty cool experience. Going from not thinking I was gonna play again to having playing at such a high level.
That's an incredible experience. And like you said, those lessons can apply outside of the pool, in our career. We start off, not even understanding kind of what's going on. We arrive somewhere, don't really, we haven't really immersed ourselves in technology, or we haven't really immersed ourselves in large scale projects, and then get there, exposure, effort, energy, talking to people, learning where we made mistakes, and we can come with more confidence. And it's same thing, not being too, not getting too down or too confident, because both can be very, they can, I'm not sure, alter what's actually there, alter reality pretty strongly. Create a lot of bias.
Yeah. I mean, so my job right now as a solution engineer in pre-sales. So I work with customers in my previous roles, working with customers too. And, it's very cyclical, obviously, and customers are going to be different. You're going to lose some deals. You're going to win some deals. And I think it's just being able to, again, being an athlete, ride being able to have that emotional poise as you're going through, and, not get too frustrated if, a deal doesn't go your way. But going also back to the kind of the teamwork and the leadership skills, within my scope now of being a solution engineer and scoping out the technology, I know what I need to do, and I know who I need to talk to get things done. So it's able to navigate that and kind of tell people, and delegate specific work, and kind of similar to as a goalkeeper in water polo is being a leader on the defensive side of telling people kind of where to go, because for the whole team it's going to be beneficial to be able to get it done. So yeah, I think there's a lot of applications for sure.
Yes. So you mentioned that you're customer facing. Have you always been and you mentioned this isn't your first role, but have you always been customer facing in your career?
So after I got back from water polo, I went back to EDF, and that was a customer facing role, business development. After that, I went in to work at a nonprofit called the Center for Sustainable Energy, and that wasn't really a customer facing role. That was, we had, government funding for specific projects, so energy efficiency or renewable projects that we were doing there. So not that one, but after that, once I left that job, everything else has been customer facing on, both customer success or account management. Well, technically, after I left there, I went to an in-house role, and that wasn't necessarily customer facing, as an associate director of sustainability. So in-house, trying to, help an organization shift to a more sustainable path, So I would say it's a mix and match of both customer facing and not.
What was that in-house, shift changing position? How was that for you?
Yeah, it was different. So I went from startup, so climate tech, sustainability reporting solution, to essentially joining one of the customers and being the customer in-house. And that persona is it's like a sustainability manager, director. My exact role was as an associate director of sustainability. It was helping set some of the strategy, but also figure out, how the program was going to get structured and do a lot of the work, because it was a brand new department for the company. It was a commercial real estate company, publicly traded, and we had to start, publishing a sustainability report because there's pressure from, investors, from different stakeholders, regulators. So it was an interesting job for sure. It was my first time working at, a REIT, a real estate investment trust, in like such a corporate setting. But yeah, I definitely learned a lot.
That's interesting. And so EDF, you'd been in EDF, and then what was that center?
Center for Sustainable Energy.
Center for Sustainable Energy, and then this REIT.
Measurable after that. That's where I spent a majority of my time. So a San Diego-based tech company. I was there for 4 years. I got there, I think I was employee 23, 24.
Wow.
Early stage, we had just closed the Series A, which is pretty cool. So I came in as, customer success manager. There was only 4 of us at the time. So they, handed me some customers and I helped them use the technology, support. So got a lot of good experience there. And then I did that for a year, and then I rolled into another role as in account management. And that was a new role for the company. So figuring out how to leverage the tech for upsells, trying to increase revenue and minimize churn of the customer base. So I was trying to set that strategy, like renewals and things.
And is Measurable's primary product a software?
Yeah, SaaS product.
Okay. So those are 4 fairly different employers.
Yeah.
Like they don't even seem like they're in, maybe, I'm not sure. Is EDF and the Center for, are they in the same industry or?
Somewhat. The consistent thing of my career has been energy, like renewable energy, energy efficiency, and sustainability. But I've been able to work at so many different types of organizations that kind of tap into this, different functions, right? But that's the consistent thing, I would say, across my journey, from working as a business development intern at a large renewable energy company to working as an associate at a renewable or sustainable energy nonprofit organization. So, taking funding and doing research projects, to working at a SaaS company that's focused on sustainability. And now the term is like ESG, environmental, social, governance matters for these organizations. So it's kind of like a consistent thread. And, from there went and did that job, managed the product, but from in-house, from a real estate company, for this real estate company. And then I got poached by IBM. So now I work at IBM as a sustainability solution engineer. So still focused on sustainability, but now back on the tech side as a technical expert.
Okay.
Yeah.
Energy, renewable energy, energy conservation, sustainability. These are topics that they're touching everything. Every industry wants energy conservation. It's a huge cost, and even poor sustainability habits, I believe, are also becoming a huge cost. And what have you learned about, just through these different positions, energy, and what are some, and sustainability? What have you gained in through a corporate industry setting? Because I think a lot of times we understand from a personal setting what we have to do as individuals, but not necessarily how corporations are being forced to and are adjusting their habits with these principles in mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I would say I've learned a lot, and a lot of the market is changing really fast in terms of, new regulation and what's expected of different companies. But, when I started out, it was really, renewable energy, energy efficiency. Then I joined Measurable, and turned into like sustainability reporting. And that has been, ESG has become a term that is commonly used across every sector now. So a lot of companies are focused on, how their organizations are focused on environmental matters. So it'd be things around climate change and, energy usage, carbon emissions, to social matters. So things like, diversity within their organization or on their board, or, community investment opportunities. And then from a, governance side is really how the organization is focused, from a corporate governance structure and how they monitor these different things that are, focused. But it's kind of hard for organizations. There's different pressure points that come in as to why they would do certain things. Some companies have always been doing, focused on these matters, whereas some companies are now picking up the slack and trying to shift. But like the pressures are really coming from investors. That's kind of like where it starts out. And I think BlackRock was kind of like one of the earlier ones. Larry Fink, he was the CEO. He came out with a letter at the beginning of 2021 that was urging CEOs to start focusing on climate change and sustainability and start reporting these things. And BlackRock is a huge investor, asset manager. So that kind of like started, the dominoes started falling from there. So yeah, it's kind of like the trickle effects. So like a lot of the, investment community has been focused on these things. So now it's like everyone is trying to get it in order. But from a regulatory perspective, like Australia has required organizations start like report on carbon emissions since like 2008. And then in Europe has also been super far ahead in terms of like carbon emission reporting and regulation. And the US, I think, has kind of been slacking on things. But as of late, there has been regulation that's currently being a ruling proposed that would require public organizations to report their carbon emissions, but also any climate-related risks associated with, their revenues and any costs associated with that. So that would be things like, from a physical side, what are the impact of climate change from like hurricanes and sea level rise or wildfires? Like how would that affect your business? And you can imagine like for different types of organizations, it's going to be different. There's also a transitional thing. So it's like how with the effects of climate change and these targets that are set, like what are customers? What's customer sentiment around your product? If you produce like dish soap, and if you're Procter and Gamble, like, because customers are going to want to know like how is that sustainability? What are the sustainability aspects of that? So customers, but also technology advancement, like how is that going to affect your business? So there's a lot of things. So I mentioned the investment community. That's one, but there's also like the governments, that are pushing a lot of this too, like the Paris Agreement, if you've heard of that, which, is essentially like the principle of reducing your carbon emissions in line with the 1.5 degrees. So we can't exceed a 1.5 degree scenario or increase in Earth's temperature. So yeah, there's a lot of factors that go into it, and organizations are trying to figure it out. So my role right now is not on full strategy, but from a technology perspective and reporting, how can we help these organizations to get the data they need to make those decisions to shift their businesses?
Okay. And so are your customers other businesses?
Yeah. So
Okay.
yeah, we have the product that I focus on is part of a larger suite, but it's primarily similar to Measurable. It's like an ESG sustainability reporting tool, but it's applied across multiple different industries. So you can imagine, like a global, like we can use Procter and Gamble as an example, like a global organization with multiple product lines with a massive supply chain. So being able to track everything from the manufacturing and everything within their existing boundary of like emissions. So that's like their scope 1 and 2 emissions, but also the whole supply chain. So tracking like from all of their vendors and all the different product lines, like what is the carbon emissions associated with that? It's a lot of data to work with, and a lot of data that companies aren't used to ingesting and managing. So that's what the technology does. It like helps bring all that data, allows them to bring it to a source of truth and monitor it, and then eventually be able to report it out as needed and make business decisions off it.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. And you mentioned these regulatory possibilities. Are these coming at the federal or state level?
So it's interesting. There are different things at state levels that are being pushed. A lot on, my background is in real estate. So there are different, obviously like California, there's energy codes for buildings that you need to hit. But there's also different laws now, like in New York, there's new rulings being passed around the actual carbon emissions of the buildings themselves, where you have to pay fines if you exceed certain thresholds. So things like that are popping up at the state level. And then at the federal level was the one I was just discussing, which is like from the SEC. So like publicly traded organizations need to start reporting this data by 2024.
Oh, wow. But
Yeah.
privately owned ones do not.
Yeah, but it's interesting because the market's shifting. So a lot of those private companies are probably supporting the publicly traded companies. Maybe it's a supplier. So like Walmart, for example, they have also a huge supply chain and suppliers that are going to start reporting this out, and they need to make sure that it's buttoned up and tight in terms of the data that they're reporting, because it's going into financial statement. So they need to make sure that every external party, maybe all those private companies that they contract with, that they have access to this data too, so they can start reporting. So yeah, it's really interesting.
That is really interesting.
Yeah.
And that makes sense, because if Walmart has to report these numbers, and they have several subcontractors, well, all rules that are applied to Walmart are now applied to their subcontractors. So it's like you said, it will ripple. Even if it is only required at the public level, that's a huge portion. That's a lot of GDP, and that GDP bleeds into the private portion as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would say the state of the market right now, though, is, if I guess I can explain like on emissions and the categories. So like scope 1, 2, and 3. Scope 1 emissions is everything that within the operational boundary of a company that all the fuel that they burn. So anything within that. So if your apartment building, if you own this building, you have operational control over it, all the gas that you're burning for your stove, that's like your scope 1. All the electricity that you're purchasing, so that fuel is being burned by SDG&E to provide you that electricity, that's your scope 2. And then everything outside of that, so like that lamp that you purchased, all this podcast gear that you purchased, that's like external, but there are carbon emissions associated with you purchasing this. And there's 15 different categories of scope 3 emissions that I don't have to get to on the pod, but it's massive. And so a lot of companies are just estimating those scope 3 emissions because it's not within their direct control. A lot of it, the data is coming from external sources. So the race right now is to figure out how to gather this information in a consistent fashion. So I think a lot of the different technology players, and it's a pretty saturated market now in terms of solutions, but everyone's trying to figure that out.
Okay. That'll be huge once that data is kind of standardized and really all encompassing.
Yeah.
What do you expect to happen at that point?
Yeah. I think what we're going to see is across different industries, kind of these maybe trade associations or different groups, and like standards to actually be set for, because every industry is going to be unique in terms of what that scope 3 boundary really looks like. So you'd probably see some standardization, maybe kind of bringing in, creating one consistent approach to getting this information. Right now, it's kind of all over the place. So I think it has to be broken out by industry, and you can probably see different, nonprofit groups or someone coming out, or regulatory bodies kind of coming out and saying something about it, and deploying something. So I could see that happening. I see obviously technology being a big player in that to help create the foundations of, all this information. I think it comes around like data exchange, how to be able to
Yes.
to transfer data between organizations, but doing it in a secure fashion. So probably see that kind of baking out a little bit more. I mean, the reality is it's like a lot of people are still working in spreadsheets today.
Yes.
Data is being copied. So and you can't, it's hard to just tell everyone just use this because there's different competing platforms. Everyone is, pushing different solutions. And when you're thinking about a problem like climate change and, everyone's trying to report this information, you need some sort of outside entity to say this is the standard on how to do it.
Yes.
So yeah, it's kind of the Wild West still.
It is the Wild West, but it's very important. And government, there's a lot of things that, the government isn't poised to do very well. But, one thing that they've done very well is manage wild management in managing the environment, national parks, national forests. And I feel like the environment is one place where the government is able to have a good influence and is able to manage it. Because if you tell a single corporation, hey, if they have nothing to keep them honest and they can save a lot of money cutting corners in sustainability, some might not, maybe a majority might not, but one or two probably will. And that could have huge repercussions, just those one or two. But if consumers are able to see data points, see, okay, here's the standard for the industry. Most players are here. Player X is way down there in sustainability. And just that knowledge, somehow being able to get that out to consumers will make a huge difference in their purchasing power.
Yeah. And not just consumers too, business to business, from investment community. You're seeing there's a lot of rating agencies that have popped out. Also kind of all over the place, depending on, how the scoring actually works and the lack of consistency in this data and how to score it. So there are rating agencies that are out there that will rate, two companies side by side based off their, environmental or social governance output, based off, reporting. But yeah, I think you're going to see a shift from the market. But when it comes to like what the government can do, I mean, you've seen it in the past with like different tax credits and its incentives. So like for renewable energy, there's been an investment tax credit that, for developers of renewable energy, they get great tax benefits to be able to do this. So you started seeing like a huge influx of renewables coming in. And it's not because it's the right thing to do. It's because there's money to be made doing that, compared to other traditional ways of doing it. So there has to be incentive. So it's like, what is that? And I think, a lot of different research companies and some of the big consulting firms are, kind of trying to connect the dots of like, yes, better ESG sustainability performance leads to better returns, but the data isn't really all there to like affirm that. I think we'll get there, but there's fines. If there's a carbon tax, then yeah, like you're going to see some clear impacts.
Yes. And that's the one thing, I don't think people... Is there a carbon tax right now?
So, I mean, in different parts of the world, yeah. In the U.S., there's like cap and trade programs. Like in California, we have a cap and trade program where within specific industries, you can, depending on your emissions, you can kind of, broker them between different organizations and sell the amount of carbon that you emitted, and you have to be below a certain threshold. So yeah, in some places it does exist. But at a federal level, like a carbon tax does not exist for the U.S.
What do you think about a carbon tax?
I don't know, to be honest. And these are like my personal opinions, obviously.
Yes.
Um,
Which you
it's-
don't have to say.
Yeah, I mean, I think it could help, but I don't think it would be passed. Like, just given the state of the country, like of the U.S., like not everyone is behind. Even this proposed ruling that's gone out, like it's going to be battled, like to the end. We'll see, and it also depends on who's in office to be able to push these specific things. I think a carbon tax could help, and I think a lot of industries would be hit pretty hard from that. But is that the right thing to do for the economy? I know we have to hit these specific targets, but there might be other ways. To be honest, like my personal opinion, and I like work in this field, right? And like you're seeing all these companies come out with their net zero targets and things, and what they're going to do. They're going to hit this by 2030, but it's a lot of work.
Yes,
Like you have to shift your entire business strategy to hit some of these goals, which is going to impact you financially. Do we, like, our companies actually, I know they've said that they're going to do things, but when it comes down to the brass tacks, like is it really going to happen? And should it happen? Certain organizations, yes, some industries, I believe that they should shift, but it's a matter of how much you're going to invest now versus how much you're going to invest later. From the effects of climate change, yes, like I think it snowed in Huntington Beach like earlier this week, which is crazy. And we've seen things like the Texas freeze. Like these certain climate effects are going to happen. There's going to be new regulation that pops up, but like how much are you going to invest now to be able to weather that storm versus later, from those, like from a risk perspective. So I think, I personally think companies should be assessing it that way. I would, from my optimistic side, like, this is a huge problem. And I feel like if we were all able to come together and do this, then that's awesome. But to be honest, like, I don't think I have faith in humanity to make that happen. I think it's just human nature.
Yes.
So I think companies should just really try to understand, instead of, potentially putting out things in it's called greenwashing. Have you heard of that before?
I saw it. You posted something. Could you explain greenwashing?
Yeah. Greenwashing is essentially when a company, within their marketing, they put something out that almost positions themselves as a more sustainable company than maybe they are in reality, So they're using their marketing to kind of portray themselves as maybe more sustainable for, some benefits, maybe, customer, brand image with their customers. So, and that's a huge risk, because when it comes to that and you're doing these specific things, but you're not actually hitting your targets or what you're saying you're going to do, could have a huge impact on kind of the returns of your company.
And it delegitimizes that form of advertisements for companies and products that are actually handling their business sustainably. And like if people find out, oh, that person had sustainability, go green advertisements, but they're really terrible, they're really, have a poor environmental grade, then they're going to bring that sort of skepticism to all, even maybe products that have legitimate backing of sustainability. They're just going to question it anyways because of that last one.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's there's just a lot of risk that goes into it, I think. So I think, some organizations will hit, specific targets that they've set, and others will try, but at what cost,
Yes. And how hard will they try?
Yeah. So yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how it plays out, from like an economic perspective for organizations.
Yes, it will. And I guess, what do you think about it so how much of the environment, climate change, do you think comes down to an organization and the individual? I think it's got to be mostly the organizations.
Yeah. I mean, you see these articles, it's like, oh, I switched to using paper straws. And then these organizations, just spilled in a massive amount of oil, like directly into the ocean.
Yes.
But the impacts that we have aren't going to matter. I see that. I think corporations have a bigger responsibility when it comes to these things. Absolutely. But if you think about like a global population, I mean, if every single person did something, then yeah, we would have significant change, because we are for a lot of these, B2C companies, like we are the consumer. So we're still consuming their goods, right?
Yes.
Or in services, knowing that, what they're doing is wrong. But I think you're going to get more eco-conscious. You already have seen that, like eco-conscious consumers who are making different changes. But like from a global scale, like massive organizations have a much bigger part, because a small tweak in business strategy could have monumental effects, I think, globally. Certain industries, like, it's hard though, if you look at the airline industry, like all the fuel that is used, that goes into, flying across the world. I don't know how many flights are happening, per day. I actually have a book, on kind of I forget what it's called, the Carbon Almanac. But it has like a breakdown of like every industry and kind of like the impacts it has. But from an airline industry, as a consumer, like you need to get from point A to point B, and that's been normalized that yes, we can fly. You can go buy a flight and you're going to do that. What if the airline said that, hey, because of environmental reasons, we're not going to do that flight, or you buy it and it gets canceled for some reason? Like there's just, there's certain hard things like that come into play.
Yes. It is very hard. And it's very hard to tell people to stop traveling.
Yeah.
Or I think one thing is like, I don't know too many people that work in the oil industry. And I think if we're able to, I do know people that work in the solar panel industry though. And like you said, more eco-conscious. People can't sacrifice their well-being necessarily right now because they're not forced to. And that's why I think the government has a huge role to play in this, because one thing that I think of is like in the late 19th century, hunters wiped out wildlife in North America. They could kill an animal and then they could sell it. And no one was stopping them. They could kill as many animals as they want until the government said this is illegal. That's slightly how I see a lot of unsustainable corporate practices.
Mm-hmm.
You're killing as many metaphorical wild animals. Those animals really, now wild animals belong to the country. And, same with all of this environment to some degree. It really belongs to the country, which is divided up amongst all of its citizens. And if no one is going to tell these people, hey, you can't take you can't take it anymore because we know it's terrible. We know it emits something. Then corporations are going to keep on doing it because there's money. That's what they see.
Yeah. I mean, if you even expand it out further, like climate change is a global issue. Like the amount of carbon in the atmosphere is because of humans, and that crosses borders. It crosses organizations. It's a communal effort for us to try to stop this. But like, certain countries emit more than others. Like per capita, U.S. is one of the largest in terms of carbon per capita. So it's, like we are the culprit for a lot of these things. But as a country, we haven't, come together to take specific action. Like we pulled out of the Paris Agreement and then we came back in. So, I mean, even, yes, organizations, but like at a global level from country, like the highest levels of political power, this is happening. And there's, conferences that are going on about this. Like COP27 was a big conference that went down where, the largest, like people with most influence and political power from the world, including like from government, from nonprofit organizations and the private sector, publicly traded companies, everyone went there to kind of discuss these topics. So it's like those are happening, but yeah, I don't like humanity hasn't really faced the closest thing similar to this is COVID, actually, kind of like bringing us for full circle is like as a global community, how do we deal with something? It's kind of similar in that way.
And that makes it much more complicated.
Yeah. It's a lot.
Well, Cameron, we've talked about COVID. We've talked about Call of Duty. We've talked about sustainability. Are there any last words or thoughts that you'd like to leave the audience before we end it?
Yeah, if you want to buy sustainability software, hit me up. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I mean, what I'll say, we did cover a lot. I mean, focusing on kind of my trajectory in life, if we want to go from there, and everyone says this, but it's like, it's not linear and you can't, anticipate every little thing in your life. I never thought I would be in the position I am now at age 30. But, having specific goals that you want to hit, even if it's just an idea or a vision of what you want in your life, I think is important to have. And then doing what you can and, taking opportunities as they come to kind of make that vision become a reality is going to be key. So for everyone listening, it was nice having you listen to me.
Yes, and I'm sure
thanks for having me.
You're welcome. My guest today has been Cameron Ravanbach. Thanks for coming on the podcast, Cameron.
Thanks, dude.